Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Giordano, and today I'm joined by our latest guests, Nick and Mathilde of the Next Meridian expedition. Nick and Mathilde are a French-Italian couple in the midst of a world tour in their Land Rover Defender. In this episode from the field, Nick, Mathilde, and I discuss the ins and outs of shipping a vehicle to Australia, top tips for visiting Antarctica on a budget, and finding your own travel rhythm while overlanding. Here we go. We're in location in Italy and Australia. I hope you enjoy the episode.
And special thanks to Overland Explorer Vehicles, also known as OEV, for their generous support of this week's podcast. The OEV is one of the most respected camper builders in our industry, using premium four-season construction and the highest quality components to manufacture campers capable of traveling around the world. Even the Overland Journal podcast host Ashley Giordano uses one of their tray model pop-up units on their Tundra for traveling throughout Europe and Northern Africa. From the composite panels, aluminum exoskeleton, and even their own aluminum tray beds, OEV is built to last your next overland journey.
Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host today, Ashley Giordano, and I'm currently in Italy, beaming in with Next Meridian, Nick and Mathilde, and they're currently in Australia. So kudos to the power of the interwebs for this fun podcast extravaganza, global overland situation. Anyway, welcome, Nick and Mathilde. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, we love being so far away and still being able to chat. That's the real traveler spirit.
Yeah, so you guys are in, as I said, Australia, and you're traveling around the world in your Defender named Albatross. What kind of Defender are you driving?
We are currently driving a Defender 112 from 2012, and
110.
it's a 110.
It's
nice. I know that, I think it was Brittany Highland did a write-up of your Land Rover for Overland Journal with all the details and all the history behind it. But yeah, feel free to share a little bit more about the build process and how that all got started.
Okay. Yes, that's right. So we did have a review done about a year ago where we went a little bit about the specifications of the vehicle, about how many liters it could carry and tanks, how it was built inside and why it was built this way. And so to quickly recap some of this, we built out a car that felt like a home because we would be traveling around the whole world, doing all 7 continents. And so we wanted to make sure it felt cozy and that everything worked with just a click and that we weren't doing too many manual jobs on the car while traveling. So for example, there's a shower and a hot shower system with just the switch of a button. There's lights a little bit everywhere inside. There's a diesel heater so that in the cold moments it would really heat up the vehicle. So for example, when we were in Alaska, it was minus 10, 15 Celsius, and we were inside in t-shirts and shorts. And so that for us is what should be traveling for us, is just to make it as comfortable as possible. And it's also fun just to build out the car. And so, yeah, we really built it out to feel like a home, and it's got everything you need in terms of functionalities except for the bathroom. And so if you've seen a picture of our vehicle, you'll see a shovel on the bonnet, and that technically is our bathroom. So
yeah, we used to travel with like much simpler vehicle with a tent on the side and something, very, very simple. This one is pretty simple when you look at some gear like in the US or even in Australia where we're here. We're pretty minimalistic, but there's a set of like comfort elements that we knew we wanted because when you live for such a long journey, we really wanted to have the feeling that we could stay in this car forever, that we never would have this attraction to like take a hotel or go to a camping. We wanted to be able to stay in the mountains for an entire month if needed and feel at home, because we knew in some countries we would want to like stay and explore, and that's the feel we have here. So we kind of tested the vehicle over like several trips in hot places, cold places around Europe, and refined a tiny bit every time until we nailed kind of the right level of comfort that was still pretty like simple as a setup, but made us feel like we're at home, we can live for an entire 3 years. And it's also like important in terms of budget, because for us we knew we couldn't afford to like pay Airbnbs every so often when we left. So the idea was, let's make this car home and we will never feel we need to pay for like sleeping anywhere.
I think that's something when we were building out our Tundra and our pop-up camper, we thought about that as well. We wanted something that was sustainable in a travel sense.
Yeah.
So you feel like you can travel for a long period of time and be comfortable, just like you're saying. And I think that's worked. Do you think that that's been something that's been successful for you guys? You feel like you're at home and it feels like it's comfortable in a way that, you know, you don't feel like you need to get an Airbnb or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that's 100%. And the car has gone through a few evolutions since the departure, because as we travel, we notice small things we could ameliorate or change. And but since the get-go, it has always been functional and never felt like we needed to go camping.
I think the proof of that is that sometimes we meet people and they invite us to their place and they're like, oh, you'll see we have a spare bedroom and we have a full bathroom and you'll feel amazing not to camp for a night or two. And it's super generous and we love those invitations. But sometimes like they don't quite realize that this is our home and this is where we feel the most comfortable, and sometimes just like packing a bag and going in that spare bedroom feels like camping for us. You see what I mean? Like our real bed is in this car.
Yes. And sometimes like packing all your stuff up from being at your home is like packing to go on a trip. It takes a while, and it's a fun experience. That's great. And I love that you tested it out in different climates and temperatures before you left, because that's not always able to happen. And with Europe, I think that's a bit easier because there's such a wide range of temperatures and climates in Europe. So that's great. So you don't have to go far, to be able to test a hot, dry environment, or go to the Scandinavian countries in the winter or whatever,
Yeah, I guess the only kind of type of climate we couldn't test from Europe is the hot and humid, the tropical one. And I think that's the only one where we can say we suffered. To be completely honest, if there's one time we felt we needed to get out of the car, it was once in Colombia in a very, very humid place. We were, after a shower, after ventilating everything we could, we were still like sweating from every part of our body. It was like 9 p.m. It was not getting any colder. And it's the only time over the entire trip we looked at each other and we said, we're out of here. We wrapped up everything, we packed up, and we went like during the night in the smallest like truck town and found a $10 hotel room with AC. And I think it's the only time
Yeah, that's fair. Colombia gets, like the coast of Colombia gets really hot, really hot. I remember going into like grocery stores that had AC specifically to just like get out of our truck. It was like so hot and miserable. But that's great. That's great. I love it. What are some of those little changes that you've made recently?
So the last changes, which is to us Albatross 4.0, is we had an engine change literally 2 months ago. We had a cracked piston just coming out of a town. We packed up with food and fuel and water, and we were ready to go, hit the road in Australia, finally going. And this is the 5th day in Australia after taking the car out of port. And we were just super excited. And on a tiny uphill, all of a sudden, this smoke comes out and oil seeping out of the engine. And we're thinking, oh gosh, this looks bad. And then this very kind mechanic helped us diagnose the issue, and it was a cracked piston. And so we had to do an engine swap. And that was 2 months ago.
Wow. That must have been a lot, just coming, several days after getting the vehicle back and right away.
Yeah, it was really, really a little bit frustrating, but a little bit at the same time, kind of like it's part of the adventure. It happens. We kind of knew this was going to happen because Defender engines, well, at least the modern ones, were known for not having great reputations. And so we funnily said it before the trip started, like, we might have to do an engine change because everyone who has the same car as us will do one. And then on the way, we were thinking, nah, probably not us. And then it happened to us. But so it was funny. But if you do ask like about upgrades, the last upgrades we did was we actually finally were able to lift our bed up when the pop top goes up. So that's something we were really excited about because it takes up a lot of space, that bed. And now that it goes up with the roof, it kind of creates a whole new space. And so our car is 3 meters squared. But it just feels like we've just doubled in size in the living room, and we can finally have an extra guest inside, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, it feels great.
Another one, a big one, we learned our lesson from tropical areas, and before heading to more tropical areas in Northern Australia, where we are now, in Southeast Asia, we changed our tent canvas because we had a insulated, like very thick tent canvas with only one window, which didn't allow any flow of air. And so now we changed it for a 3-window canvas where you can open everything and get as much breeze as you can. And that's a lesson from the last time in the tropics in preparation for Southeast Asia, where we're going to boil for sure.
Boil and sweat a lot. Yeah.
Which pop top do you have?
We have a Nextech pop top from Germany, and the canvas is from RRC in France.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, so let's go back in time a little bit here. I'd like to know more about how you guys got started. I know you both had traveled a lot previously to the start of this round the world trip. And maybe just give a little bit of background about where you're from, each of you, and go from there.
So background, I'm a purebred French product. Spent the first 18 years of my life in the Alps, eastern part of France, in the mountains. But always, through books, I think, and literature in general, like always wanted to travel. I was just, I'm 18, I'm out. I got stuck a little bit more in Switzerland for studies in the Alps. And then after that, I started traveling, spent several months in Argentina working there, almost a year in Jordan working there. And then I was dragged up back to Europe. My parents wanted me to do my grad school before like wandering on my own. And that's where I met Nick next to me, who was a hardcore traveler as well from birth in his case. So yeah, for me it was natural continuation to continue traveling with someone like Nick. Go for your background.
Yeah, so mine's a little bit kind of confusing, but I'll make it short. So born in Thailand and lived most of my life in Asia, so for 12 years and then 6 years in Africa before graduating high school. So I'm French-Italian. I've got both nationalities, but always did British or American schools. So I would say English is my first language, not French nor Italian. And with Mathilde, we actually speak English in our videos. Everything is in English because my French is fine, but not great, especially when it comes to writing. Then did my bachelor's in business in France in a private English school, and then business master's in Belgium where I met Mathilde. So we both graduated our masters. We both worked in Paris and Belgium for 4 years. Mathilde was at the United Nations and I was working for a startup. And then on a trip, we decided to quit our jobs and leave on this trip. And it happened to be just before COVID, and we had all of COVID to prepare the trip.
It's when we met, we knew we wanted to travel. We knew we wanted to like live abroad. And life, you just find your first job. And we were lucky at that point, like both our jobs were allowing us to travel. So we thought, oh, we got the golden tickets, like we got a job and they're paying us to travel around. But yeah, after 4 or 5 years, you like settle back and you're like, maybe Paris and Brussels was not the dream, like remember what we wanted to do before that. And we couldn't really get set on like a place where we would live somewhere else than Europe. And then I don't remember. We were like, oh wow, those guys are traveling around the world, looking at social media somewhere, and we were like, oh, but it's probably super expensive. We will probably never be able to afford that before we're like old or something. And then I think you went online, Nick, and you started asking questions. How much would it be? How much would it be? And you asked around. And when you put the math together and you like are used to travel cheap, not pay for hotel every night or those kind of things, we were like, maybe we can pay for that. Maybe we can save that kind of money. And that's where the preparation started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are quite surprised. I think the two questions that seem to be the most common, one, how do you afford it? And two, where do you go to the bathroom? But
yeah.
yeah, but it's like I've said this many times, and I think it's great talking to travelers like you guys because it's possible in many cases. You just kind of have to do the math and be on a strict budget. And sometimes, like for us, it's actually more, it makes more sense for us financially to travel than it does to live at home in Canada, just because of various reasons. So for you, obviously it sounds like it's very similar.
Hey, Ashley, we're back.
Hey, so
can you start again at it's actually more for us?
Yes. So it's actually sorry. So for us, it's actually, it makes more financial sense for us to be on the road than it does to be at home. And I'm wondering if it's kind of similar. It sounds like it could be for you as well.
I guess we were living in capital cities, so yeah, our expenses were much higher. We were between Paris, which is one of the most expensive capital in Europe. Brussels is much cheaper, but the way of life is such that when you're a town, you have maybe less free stuff to do, so you just end up spending more for maybe things that you are less geared toward. You see what I mean? Maybe you want to enjoy the outside, but because you don't have as much opportunities, you just go to a bar or to a restaurant. So for us, it makes sense now. I think we discovered a new way of living. We became much more minimalistic in our way of life without like revolutionary, without changing entirely what we do. I think we realize we need less.
Yeah, we've come to really enjoy the simple things of life. And what really makes a journey special is just meeting all the people. There's so many people. And Ashley, we'd love to meet you as well. We've been following your trip a little bit. We've heard about you through podcasts and magazines, through other travelers. And so for us, it's meeting the travelers, but also the locals, because locals always say, hey, why don't you come this way? Or just sometimes, when you're lost in Central America, just driving up this track, and then there's a little village and they all come to you and the kids run up to you and they say, hey, come on, come over. And, and we say, hey, can we sleep in front of your yard? And they're like super excited. And you spend a whole evening with them. And that's what makes, the greatest memories, more than seeing the waterfalls and seeing, each of the beaches and surfing. And that's fun too. And that's what the city was missing for us. And so 100%, we love what's happening here. And
spontaneous interaction.
Yeah.
For sure. And that sense of community and connection with other people, something that is so important in chatting with people from different parts of the world and what their perspectives on life. You wouldn't necessarily get that interaction back home. So very fulfilling part of travel. Have you had some of those experiences in Australia yet? I mean, you were talking about the mechanic, but yeah.
I think, in Australia, I think the most significant encounter we made was actually when we broke our engine. So Nick was describing we were leaving a town, taking that uphill, big smoke coming from the engine bay. And we were there on a Friday end of afternoon. It's always a Friday end of afternoon that those kind of things happen. On the side of the road, we were calling garage and workshops, and they were all like, "No, we're closing. See you on Monday. See you on Monday." And we were like, "Okay, we'll just have to call a tow truck and wait in a campsite like all weekend." And then this car stops, and a guy like 2 meters tall, huge guy, comes out with like working clothes on, and he was like, "Guys, don't worry, I'll get you out of the highway. Come to my place. I have an apartment. I have a spare car. You don't worry, you follow me." And we were like, all right. And he was so kind. So he told us to his place and gave us a beer, and we started talking, and he explained us that when he was our age, about 30 years old, he traveled in Europe in a van, and he saw our license plate, and he thought, those guys, they're not from here, I need to help them. And he explained us that when he was in Europe, he met so many people who helped him that he had to do it. And we ended up staying like 22 days or 23 days at his home, where like he had a little like side apartment next to his home. He lended us a small car he was using to teach his daughter to drive manual, and we cooked for them some French stuff. We talked to the girls about like professional careers because they were like teenagers looking what to do in life. They brought you hunting. We went to the beach together. They invited us to eat. We were going to the football games of the girls. It ended up being the best encounter ever. So Australia, 5-star.
Yeah. It truly was, and it really felt like a family. We stayed with them 2 weeks and a half, and it's always the hardest part is when you leave, because you have to say goodbye, and it just feels weird. And so we keep in touch still sometimes on WhatsApp, but it's not the same. When you're there, that's when the magic is really there. And it's all about paying forward. I'm sure in the overlanding community, it's something that resonates in a lot of people's ears, but now we are the one receiving the help and meeting a lot of people. And then when we're done with this trip, it'll be up to us, and we can't wait to see how we're going to do it. But we're extremely excited one day, to have a house with a garden and a spare place and whatnot, and just to give it all for free to all the travelers that come through and give them as many amenities and help as possible. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's very exciting, all of it.
Yeah, it's something definitely that becomes a natural tendency. We've done that as well when we have periods when we're back home, or if we're staying in an apartment, or people are coming through. It's so nice to have people over or to stay. And we've been also on the receiving end many times than we are right now, actually. So yeah, it's like what comes around goes around. It's like the circle of overlanding, It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. It's magical, and it's like simple pleasures of life, just simple, basic humanity, and you see it a lot more when you're out there than when you're in the city, because in the city it's busy and running, and it's good. It's just different. When you're out there, people are like, "Oh gosh, do you want a glass of water? Hey, do you want to come over for a meal? Hey, can I help you with something?" And they have time for you, and they try and listen and try and understand. And that's just, for us, it's number one, just the people.
It sounds cheesy, but I mean, maybe the surprising fact is that it sounds surprising for most people that 99.999 people that we met on this trip over 28 countries through, richer country, poorer country, north, south, center. everyone was good, like
Yeah.
everyone was kind. You asked for help, people try to help you. And so, yeah, in the same way we thought we were hospitable, we will bring it next level when we settle back, definitely.
Amazing. I'm coming to your place. You can come to mine.
Yeah, come along.
Great stuff. What is something that you two were surprised about, or when you set off from your place and you have this idea of what overlanding multiple countries would be, and now you're, I believe, 2 years plus in?
Yeah, that's correct.
What are some things that surprised you?
I start?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty. So first thing, what we just said is that most people are good. Not that I assumed there were only bad people around the world. I had traveled before, but I think I had more fears in people, and I discovered that everywhere people are out to help you, and it's full of amazingly great people who want to live a normal life. And in many countries they're categorized as, like potential thief and whatever, like we tag them with whatever words, but most people are good. And the second thing, it's more of a personal challenge, but I thought it would be tiring for me as a human used to a routine to get used to sleep in a different place every night. And I thought I would get tired of that. I really thought that would be kind of the limiting factor, and I would need to stop somewhere at some point. But Nick and I think we're part of those overlanders that move all the time. Maybe we don't cover a lot of distance, but we sleep in a different spot almost every night, and that was not tiring. It was actually great, like it was not hard to find places to sleep. It's just nice to change garden every day and meet new people and meet new places. And I think the fact that we have a comfortable setup plays a lot in that I feel comfortable everywhere, and moving every night is actually not that much of a challenge.
Yeah.
What about you?
Surprising. Honestly, I did not think you'd become a mechanic at the end of this trip. Like owning a Land Rover, everyone says when you own a Land Rover, you'll become a mechanic, and it's very true. So that was surprising to me of how much I'm going to have to put my hands on and off this car. Something surprising is how you go from a normal vacation of 2 weeks or 3 weeks to I want to see everything, all the waterfalls, all the beaches, whatnot. And actually, the more you travel, the more you say, well, it's actually the people. And so for me, it was surprising that I had a mind shift going from, the speedy yearly holiday to actually this is, bigger than a holiday now. It's part of the life. And it's actually the people that really makes a difference. And yeah, I think those two were my biggest surprises. And then like Mathilde said, it's just people are amazing everywhere. We've never had one problem on this whole trip. We've only had one tiny little issue in South America, but apart from that, it's been incredibly good. So yeah, I'm surprised about that, because we were sometimes worrying like, oh, some countries we might have to see what we do. Not at all. People are great.
I think a good example is we have this bonnet bag, on the bonnet of the car. And it holds just with clips and Velcros. Like anyone can open it. Like, by the way, if you listen to this podcast, you can open our bonnet bag. You can steal whatever is inside. And when we left, we were in Scandinavia, which has a reputation of being extra safe and there's no thief and whatever. So we thought, okay, we keep it on when we go to sleep, only for Scandinavia. And then we will put it inside when we sleep in other countries. We never removed it. We went through all Central America, all of South America. We were parking the car in the streets. No one opened that bonnet bag.
Yeah, people are saying that shovel will be used to break one of your windows or it will be stolen. It's the same shovel since 2 years and a half, and no one's touched it. So
it might change, but
it's just to say how it's pretty safe. The media is really putting a different story out there, and that was the most surprising, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. If you could give yourselves advice, your past selves, let's say like the day that you left, what would you say?
Me, I would tell me, don't be scared of people. I mean, we've said it over and over again, but don't be scared of people. They're so cool. Like, it's the best memories I have from this trip. And sometimes I would be like, oh, no, I'm scared. And Nick would go for it. And I'm so happy he went for it. Because, like, we got some of our best encounters by not being scared of people.
Yeah. I like this question, Ashley. I think it's a really good one. Personally, one of the reasons why we left on this trip and we wanted to share our videos online is because we wanted to show whoever's following that it's possible to do what you want and to follow your dreams. And, we left, we were 27, 28. We don't have much money, but putting the right mindset, I would tell my younger self, like, if you want to do something or if you want something in life that's reasonable, you can do it. You just have to put your mindset to it and just go for it. And somehow it'll work out. But, and that's what we did. We said, we got to do it. Let's go. And you need a deadline. Because if you don't put a deadline, you will never leave, because you've got your mom's birthday, you've got your cousin's wedding, you've got your promotion at work. I don't know. So you'll never leave. And so we gave ourselves a deadline and we stuck to it. We just modified it by 2 days, but we stuck to it.
And a quick announcement of our new Tires for Overlanding educational series that is going to be brought to the Expedition Portal YouTube channel. This is a 6-part series that is going to be released over the months of May and June, and it features detailed insights on mud tires, all terrains, airing down, driving in sand, vehicle preparation, tread lightly, and more. And we're grateful to Hankook Tire for helping to support this new series. So take a look at the Expedition Portal YouTube channel for more details.
That's good advice. Yeah, that date needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's so interesting speaking about the leaving process, because it's such a weird, like, you have this plan and you think you're like, we're going, and you're getting the vehicle ready. And I was just remembering from the last time we left how I had these concerns that once we were gone and once we were on the road, and this was after doing another whole trip like a decade ago, I still had these things in my brain that were like, what about this? Are we going to be okay with this? What about when we go here? Am I going to be comfortable? Is it going to be okay? Where am I going to go to the bathroom even though I've already done a trip? Like all these things that you're thinking about that when you get on the road don't necessarily even materialize as an issue. It's always like things you don't expect that you're like, okay, now we need to pivot, or now we need to adjust.
Yeah, human are funny. We get used to things so easily, like you get used to, even when we ship the car somewhere and we end up in an apartment or a house for a little bit, you get used to the comfort again and you're like, oh, how did I do it? Being in the car for a bit, you forget about that. But I think the leaving process, as you say, is probably the most meaningful. Often people ask us, what was the best moment of your trip or the most meaningful moment of your trip? It's impossible to pick one. But if a real meaningful moment is that departure moment. I mean, at least for me, it's striking. It's like you leave an entire load of concerns and like all the things that you drag in your previous life, and you embark on something radically new. It's radical as a move during the trip. So for me, my most meaningful moment is probably the departure.
Yeah, I would agree totally.
But definitely the contrast between the reality of the departure and the anticipation of it.
What do you mean?
I mean that, you're like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to be driving and traveling. But the first phase for us was like crossing Germany on the highway.
Oh, yeah.
And we slept on a highway stop for trucks and ate McDonald's, on our first night. It was just bad. It was traffic jam and highway.
You're like, I'm leaving on a road trip.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Reality.
McDonald's. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Good memories of that. Yep. How was your first day? Did you also leave like thinking, oh yeah, I'm right away, I'll be on top of the mountains or whatever, and then you end up being outside of, I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so the first time when we left, it was 2013, I think. And we were in our pickup, our Toyota pickup, with this rooftop tent that we had never used. And so the first night that we slept out in the wilderness in the rooftop tent was the first day of the trip, and it was super windy. Yeah, it was just like, whoa, this is weird. And we had all these big, like, Rubbermaid containers with all our stuff, and I had this huge rolly suitcase with us, and like we had so much like stuff, and yeah, but I just remember feeling it was an amazing feeling leaving. I think we were late, even though we did have a deadline. But yeah, what a crazy feeling that was. And then the most recent one, I honestly don't even remember the day. I think we were in Montana, and we sort of left more from like ex-overland's shop because we had issues with our truck and stuff. So it wasn't like we were leaving Canada. We were actually leaving from Montana to go, and it was a little bit harder to say goodbye this time to everybody than it was last time for some reason. So it's interesting, this like psychological mind game of every time you leave is a completely different experience and you're a different person. And it's just kind of a fascinating process, though.
It is. And one thing that we find really interesting, to go along with what you said, is if you tried to think, because you left in 2013, that's a long time ago. That's awesome. It's still awesome to hear that you're still traveling and enjoying it. But if you were to think of like a specific day, right? Because you're like so stimulated, doing so much travel. If I was to just throw you a specific day, like, I don't know, September 7th, 2018, you've done a big travel, so it might be harder, but you might be able to remember what happened on that day. You know, if you were to just look at a picture on your phone of that day, it'll maybe give you a reminder of what happened that day, and then you'd be able to give us the whole day. And that's what we've noticed with Mathilde is on this travel. Like if you were to tell me 7th September 2018, we won't know what we did. But if I was to look at a photo and we were, I don't know, somewhere in Canada, and I look at it, I'm like, wow, yeah, I remember that day, and I'd be able to give you the whole morning till evening, just because there's so much happening. It's not routine, you know, and every day is special. And so that's something we thought with Mathilde, like, goodness, this is awesome. You know, everything we do is what we want, 100%, and so we'll remember all of it.
Yeah, the whole like memory process is probably the most striking. Like, I think you remember not only the day, you remember the entire week, and you can continue like telling your story from that week onward, like for the entire year. It's so weird.
It is weird because you're constantly having novel experiences, which is, I think, an unusual thing now. But at the same time, it's like you forget sometimes where you come from. That, like,
yeah, yeah.
You get like it's over, like at a checkpoint or something, and this happened to us a lot in South America. Really friendly highway patrol or whatever police would pull us over and be like, "Okay, where have you come from?" And we're like,
yeah.
Yeah. The memory process is so interesting. Very different way of life than before when you guys were working.
100%.
In the city with office jobs, I'm sure. Maybe tell me a bit about your route. So, you departed, obviously you went through Germany. Maybe give a little bit of an overview of what you've done so far and where you're headed next.
Yeah, sounds good. So we left on April 18th, 2022, so 2 days after Easter, and we had done a big departure party with all of our friends. And we had done Scandinavia for about 2 months. So Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. And then we shipped from Germany to Canada, crossed all of it, up to Alaska and Prudhoe Bay to the top, and drove all the way down till Ushuaia, which is in Argentina, all the way at the bottom of South America. And we drove the whole way. We did one shipment from Panama to Colombia. And then we went to Antarctica. We went to see the penguins. We went and do the polar plunge, which means jumping in the water at -1 Celsius, because salt water freezes below, I think, around -2 Celsius. We slept on ice one evening and then came back to Ushuaia and drove to Buenos Aires, where we shipped the car to Australia, which we are now. So this would be for us continent 5, country 28. And the objective is to do all 7 continents. So we're missing Asia and Africa, and to finish Australia, obviously, and about 88 countries in total. So 60 more to go. It was supposed to be a 3-year trip. We've extended it to 4 years because there's just too much to see and we're a bit slower than scheduled, which is normal and totally fine.
And let's be honest, it's going to be 5.
It's going to be probably 5. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, we will see. We still have 60 countries, but Asia has a lot of smaller countries, which might go a little faster, but we'll see how it goes. And we've got tons of ideas of what will happen in the next few years. We've got tons of ideas what will happen after the trip. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at, and we want to finish the whole trip with the same car, and that's why I'm making sure we're on top of the maintenance and learning everything about the car, how it works, and what should be fixed or not.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah.
Question I have for you. Were you able to do Antarctica on a budget? Or was that somewhere you were like, you know what, this is worth splashing out. Let's just budget for it.
So for Antarctica, we try to get collaborations because it was completely out of our budget, but we wanted to do the 7 continents. So we really put our minds to it and said, you know what, we want to go there. Let's try and see if a ship company wants to bring us there in exchange for videos. And that's what happened. So we did pay a certain fee. We got a big discount, but we still paid a fee to get on the boat. And that helped us dearly get to Antarctica because it was just otherwise way too expensive.
But then we learned also you have those last minute deals that are pretty interesting, especially those days because they have more and more ships going there. So they're trying to fill up the boats at the last minute, and it seems there was space. You can get deals. I mean, it remains expensive, but I think there's deals between 3 and 4K.
4 and 4.5K per
4
person,
and 4.5K,
which is a very good deal
on last minutes.
Yeah.
And there seems to be ticket if anyone is interested in listening. It's a pretty good chance that you get a spot on the boat, especially those days, from what we heard.
Nice. Yeah, that is I think the word once in a lifetime opportunity is tossed around a lot, but that I think that truly is a once in a lifetime maybe.
Oh, it's really unique. It's really, really unique. And the only advice we can give is to make sure you pick a small boat that allows you for a lot of activities, because a lot of the bigger boats are very luxurious and brand new and they've got all the services you want, but they don't let you go on excursions. So you just see everything on the boat. At our boat, we had 2 excursions per day. So every morning and every afternoon, we would go on land, we would go kayaking, we would sleep on land, we would do the polar plunge. So much happening. And it was a smaller boat, so we had more time to actually do stuff. And so the one we went with is Polar Latitudes, and they're incredible. Ash, you can decide or not to put this in there, but we do have a promo code of $1,000 per person, just next Meridian. But we do also want to say that it's really, really advantageous if you get the last minute deal, which is 2 weeks prior to a departure, because the price is, compared to 15K or 10K, it's 4K, which is really good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it leave from Ushuaia or did you leave from somewhere else?
Ushuaia. It leaves from Ushuaia. Yep.
Fantastic. The other thing I've been dying to ask you guys about is the shipping process to Australia, because I know they have these really, really, really strict rules about vehicle shipping and the state and cleanliness of the vehicle. How did you navigate that process?
I'm kind of glad you asked that question because we're still laughing about this one. It's crazy. In all around the world, you see a lot of foreign vehicle plates numbers when you're driving around. In Australia, we haven't seen any yet. And that's because a lot of people just buy one here. It's much easier and cheaper. So what we did, because we wanted Albatross to be in Australia, is we bought 10 toothbrushes. We bought a mask like a swimming goggles mask. We bought a lot of degreasants and we just went for it.
We rented a pressure washer.
And we did all of this in Argentina before shipping the car. And I was under the car with my mask and the pressure washer, just having grease, oil falling on my face and mud, and with a toothbrush going literally through every little bolt and crack and anything. Everything had to be spotless, and Mathilde was doing everything above. So the inside of the vehicle, we removed all the shelves, all the furniture that was attached outside and inside, and cleaned everything. We removed some of the mats just to clean under the mat and super glued them down to the car. The engine was probably horrible too. Mathilde was there with a little, those little toothpicks, and she was going through the radiators, just removing every fly one by one, just so that, because, and then cleaning every single hose. And so we worked, and we did this with a good friend of ours, Tom, who we met through the Americas. He's a legend, and became today one of our really good friends. So whoever follows, you'll know who we're talking about. But he did the job with us, so he had his own Defender, and we spent 8 days, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, and we had swollen fingers, cuts everywhere, and we wouldn't stop, nonstop. And that's what it takes to get your car to Australia. I would think a little less than what we did. Maybe it would be fine. But yeah, it's a real hassle, but it's worth it.
It is difficult. Like, it requires in-depth cleaning, probably more than you've ever cleaned your car. But I think we probably overdid it a tiny bit because we were not sure, and because also there's a bit of a legend around shipping to Australia. Like, I think there's a lot of people who say it's impossible, you never get in, quarantine your vehicle, it's going to be... You have a lot of like bad omen around like sending a vehicle to Australia. But when we sent it, we actually got in contact with a few people who had like shipped their vehicles, who are not necessarily, online or on social media. And they were like, oh, I shipped it too. I didn't clean as much, but I cleaned, and they went through. So we don't say that like you can ship it as any country and you don't have to do the effort. But I think what we also learned is that sure, it's expensive, sure, it requires some extra work, but there's also some urban legends going around that discourage you from shipping your vehicle, when in the end, I think it's much more feasible than what people say around.
Yeah.
Are there additional rules in Australia about like how old your vehicle can be? Or is it mainly the cleanliness that they're worried about?
I think the age was okay. It was mostly the asbestos. So like old vehicles would have a lot of asbestos. And so you might get flagged. Ours is 2012. So I think from 2001 in Europe, they stopped asbestos. So anything after that, they kind of just ignore. But if you have a 2000 and earlier from Europe, you might be, they might, I don't think they'll check you, because the agents always told us, if you're coming under a carnet passage, which is the only way you can get in Australia, and it's the first country we needed a carnet. They said if you come under that, they won't even check for asbestos because they know you'll leave, and so you'll be fine. But again, these are all maybes. We didn't get checked, so we don't know. Yeah,
of course. And then, how did you get the vehicle, when it's all crystal clean, to the port? Without getting it all, like, say it rains and you need to drive through a puddle in order to get to the port.
Well,
that's happened to us before.
That's happened to who before? To you?
Yeah, before we shipped.
Oh no.
Yeah, we're like, cool. I mean, it wasn't to Australia, but it was still an issue. So I was curious how you transported it.
Yeah, so for us, we actually did it in Argentina, but our shipping was from Uruguay, but it's just across the sea on a ferry. And so we drove super slowly through town. We got to the ferry. On the other side, we did a last little power wash just to get off a little bit of the dust. It wasn't really mud or anything, but just dust. And then luckily it was a sunny day, not windy, dry. And so we drove super slowly to port. And because we're shipping to Australia, if we were shipping to Europe, US, or elsewhere, we would have just shipped it. But Australia, we came with a few sponges, a little bucket of water, and we just cleaned the tires and a little bit the fenders, and then most importantly, like the floor mats and the pedals, because we've been stepping on those while we're driving, and that's it.
Yeah, we looked a bit weird with our bucket and sponges on the port, but we just just cleaned it up. But I have to say, we got some shivers when there was like the wind blowing with the trees in Montevideo in Uruguay, and we saw some flowers falling on our car, and we were like, no.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you used a shipping agent and a
But-
shipping company, obviously, for that process.
Non, le premier truc qu'on a fait ici, c'est fond la caisse dans une flaque. We lost you, Ashley. We're back now.
One more time. So you obviously used a shipping company with a shipping agent for the process to take the vehicle to Australia.
Yeah, that's correct. We always do that. We always get an agent, and we always ship it with a broker on each side. We've never done it any other way. I think you can, but it's just really hard and just a lot of hassle. But we have heard of someone doing it, but it took him forever. So I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, they have the expertise as well about the little details that you might miss one thing that's for them is obvious, but for you, you have no idea. So it's always, I don't know, we've had good success. But how long, like what was the experience like, and then how long did the vehicle take?
The experience for Australia, well, it's the shipping out was pretty good. The arrival was a little bit longer because Australia was, they had to check every little thing. They needed to check the car, but then they also asked us to put all of our belongings, like literally all of our belongings, into carton boxes. And so these carton boxes had to be non-food products. They must have just been there to carry, I don't know, some sort of cartons that didn't get contaminated by food, by seeds, by anything. So they had to be clean cartons. Otherwise, that would flag. And so they had to check every single box to make sure that we had three chargers, that we actually had one, drone, that we actually had whatever. And so they needed to know everything and itemize it. So that took us probably almost, I would say almost 2 weeks of delay, just sitting there at port and being checked. And then there was just 2 natural weeks of delay because of ships and, moving containers from one ship to the next. So we had to actually wait almost a month in Perth, Australia, till our car was delivered. But the day it was delivered, in Australia, you need to go do road inspection and all that you don't need to do in other countries, but we needed to do road inspection and had to go get it roadworthy. But then once it was set, first thing we did is full speed into a puddle. We said, you know what, we're here to have fun in Australia. We're not going to keep the car clean. And so we found a puddle and went straight for it. And then that way we're like, okay, now we're ready for Australia.
Amazing. How long does the vehicle take on the water?
I think it's 4 to 6 weeks.
I think it was 6 weeks, yeah.
I think 6 weeks officially. But then there's some sort of layover for containers that was happening in Singapore, and the first ship missed the layover, and so we had another 2 weeks of delay. So 2 months on water for us.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I feel like if you're shipping a vehicle, you always kind of have to expect it's going to be late.
Yeah.
So, yeah, wow. That's a haul. That's cool. I'm sure that you feel it's worth it now that you're there.
Yeah, totally. Because we were going to come to the region, and one of the parts of the trip we're really excited about is actually to ferry along the Indonesian islands. And so, using Australia as a starting point for that is the best, because, doing it as a loop in Southeast Asia would feel a bit weird. But here, like, we're going to leave from Darwin and just go from island to island. And I think it's parts that are a bit less explored with overlanding vehicles. So it should be really exciting to see how that works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be eagerly following along for sure. Yeah. I have another question for you about how you balance like the tasks of overlanding, so like dishes and I feel like dishes always comes to mind because they always like camp set up and tear down, cleaning, grocery shopping, laundry, hand washing things with, you have a YouTube channel, so you're filming videos, and driving and figuring out what to do next, like planning. How do you balance all of those things?
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's all passion. So all of it becomes pleasure, and none of it feels like homework or anything.
Except for the dishwashing.
Except for the dishwashing. That always that always feels horrible. Sometimes we just wish we had carts and plates, but that's just bad. So, yeah, no. We actually try and keep it fair. So, for example, when it comes to the normal data stuff, like keeping the car clean, cooking, things like that, we usually balance out. Sometimes Mathilde cleans, and then I'll do the food, and then someone else does the dishes. We usually always try to be tidy in the evenings, just so that we're ready to go if anything happens in the evening. We don't leave the dishes for the next morning. We don't leave the car all open. We put away everything. And if the next morning we have to pull it all out again, we'll do that. When it comes to the videos, well, we split kind of the work. Mathilde's better at portraying YouTube videos and creating a journey and a mood out of it that I was less good at. So Mathilde is doing the YouTube, and I was better at creating stories and keeping up with Instagram posts and reels. So we kind of naturally split the work. We didn't do it from day one saying this is what you do and this is what I do. It's kind of progressively as time went. And so Mathilde does the YouTube, I do kind of the Instagram and the planning and the mechanics. And then when it comes to daily car stuff, we both do it. It just depends on the day and the mood and whatnot. But
I mean, I think that you're very good at that. Like, we set up some like habits. So Nick is cleaning the car every time we stop. Like, I think you like it also. You put yourself in a kind of transition mood, of like just cleaning all of the little part of the car, and then I would start cooking, for example. Like, it's just like little habits that are now ingrained, and because everything is so small, everything is not far. So as long as everything has a spot and you take it out at the right moment, I don't know. It's like muscle memory almost. No, we don't really
automatic.
think about it. Wrapping up the car or opening it up. We both have a job and we just like get it going. And for the rest, like, I think in the same way, like small habits. I mean, Nick is very organized, so he kind of like set up processes for us, and it's really good for me because I'm very disorganized. So I have some sort of like path that I really got used to, and then Nick saved every recommendation on a map. For example, every time we talk to someone, a little yellow star on our Google Maps, and so when it comes to the itinerary, then you open the map and you're like, okay, what's next on my map? And it's not like, oh, I have to do an extra number of research. You still have to do it when we enter a new country, but usually you have a whole lot of dots already from the recommendations. So I think it's setting up small habits, probably, that helps balancing out.
Yeah. But I would say the hardest and the first thing that we needed to get used to, and I think it's true for a lot of travelers, is the rhythm.
Yeah, that's true.
And it took us, I still remember, it took us like 4 months to get into what was our rhythm.
Yeah.
Of, what time do we wake up? What time do we start driving? How many hours do we drive? Do we hike in the morning or do we hike in the afternoon? Do we eat lunch sandwiches or do we cook in the evenings? What time do we want to stop? Are we going sunset or not doing sunset? Are we sleeping at 10 or are we sleeping at midnight? And all these small things, it seems basic, but your whole life changed. You're not going from a job 9 to 5. Your whole life is different. There's things to do every day. And it took us almost 4 months to figure out, what was the best time for us, what was the speed, when are we working on YouTube, when are we uploading our videos, when are we, whatever. Everything had to kind of mold itself into our new project, which was the world tour. And it took us, I remember, 4 months. And then at the 4th month, we're like, this feels pretty good.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's a hard one, and everyone's different for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can completely relate and understand.
Yeah. I can imagine.
And then you have seasonal and like time zone differences and
daylight.
Exactly. Yeah. So those things you're kind of always adapting when you're going to different places, or if it's summer or if it's winter, or if it's fall, like things always change. So you're adapting. But what have you found to be like a really solid way of traveling for you
Um,
in terms of the rhythm?
yeah, yeah. So to make it really easy, we try to wake up early. So try to wake we try to wake
He tries.
I try, and then I drag Mathilde out of bed sometimes. But 6:30 we try to wake up, and start the day a little bit early. Maybe we try to have wheels turning by maybe 8. We try to have small, light breakfast, so something quick. We're not cooking bacon and eggs. We are kind of the ones that just do yogurt and fruits and just kind of just get going. And we like to do activities or driving in the morning. For lunch, it's quickly sandwich or salad, just something quick, not cooking, not pulling out any stoves or anything. We're just, putting cold food together and eating that. And the afternoon would be either driving or activity. So the idea is to do maybe half day of driving or half day and a half day of activity. And then the evenings, we like to stop maybe around 4 p.m., maybe 2 hours before the light goes down. So I say 4 p.m. because here in Australia it's down by 6. But when it was, light till 11 p.m., we would probably stop around 6 or 7. And then, set up camp, start cooking and eat when sunset is happening, and then have all the dishes cleaned before the night falls. It's just, we personally prefer that just because then it's so hard. Everything's kind of everywhere. And then having the whole car packed up just before sun is completely gone, or let's say the darkness is here. And that way we're in the car and ready for the second phase of our day, I guess, which is editing videos and working on the social media, catching up on admin, preparing the itinerary, things like that. So I would say that's kind of our rhythm, but we've met so many people, and we've noticed that the ones you can travel with the easiest are the people that have the closest rhythm to you. And you are flexible, but you're flexible for a certain amount of time. There's some people we loved so much, but after maybe a week or two, it was just becoming a little difficult, stressful. And so we split up sometimes. But the person that has the same rhythm, and we ended up finding one that had the exact same rhythm, his name was Tom, and we ended up traveling with him practically the whole Pan American. We just, sometimes he would do his thing, then we would do ours, and we'd meet up again. And it just makes it extremely easy. But everyone's different and everything's fine. It's just different.
There's a little change we want to implement also now, because we have quite a bit of work with the YouTube videos and social media and like other side projects we have, and to free time on those evenings. So that's new. We're going to try to take like maybe a day per week in a place we really like, where we feel we want to do maybe like 2 nights because it's a very nice camp spot, for example, and maybe have a day of like, absorbing some of this big work so that the rest of the week we have much less to do in the evening. So that's maybe, if we had to think about a change, we've not done it for like 2 years and more, but we're going to try to implement that to free some evenings for like more fun stuff.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Ashley, since you're doing a lot of podcasts and you're writing articles, and how does it work? You guys feel like you're getting sucked into this black hole of, all the social media stuff, and then it's like, I don't have time anymore to do other stuff? Yeah,
it's been quite an interesting process. The first trip we weren't working, which was stressful in its own way, and then this trip we definitely have like a pretty good workload, but it goes in phases. So sometimes I will just prioritize doing the traveling things, like we'll focus a lot on hiking. If I don't have a bunch of deadlines for Overland Journal coming up, I will use that time. And then sometimes it's more of a crunch time, but we do move very slowly. And I feel like for the Pan America trip, we were moving probably close to every day. But on this trip, we're not at all. Like, that's not happening. Like, we would be staying like 3 days in one spot, maybe, or 4. But it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment. And we're still trying to figure it out. And exercise is like one of the things that can be really tricky. when you're traveling. So we're trying to prioritize that as well. So yeah, we just have to go slow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very easy. It's very, yeah. It's not very. It's very hard. It's very hard to figure out what is the right rhythm and how to make everything fit and enjoy when you're doing social media. If you're not doing social media, then I think it's easier. It's just that your trip probably ends faster because you don't have all the finances. But if you want to keep doing it, and that's why we make the videos, is because we want to share the world, but we also want to keep traveling. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's important. But yeah, the social media is an interesting one I've been thinking a lot about lately. And I don't know how this is for you guys, but it's easy, obviously, to get sucked into it. And for me, it's a really fun place to see what people are up to or look for potential story ideas or podcast guests. But it's also like you're traveling in this amazing way and you want to kind of absorb it all. And you have to kind of like limit your time. And I've been trying, instead of like opening Instagram, to like open my book. I think like Richard's trying to do that too. Like I've started reading so much more, and that's really helped. But yeah, my relationship with Instagram is a weird one. I'm like, what am I doing on here? I don't understand. But, but for you guys, like there's a very specific purpose to your content and your videos and what you're posting, and it's to continue traveling, but also to inspire other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I think a question we get often about like the social media work and just the fact of filming and taking pictures all the time. It's like, but isn't that taking you away from the trip itself, from the place you are, from the people you're with? And personally, I don't have that feeling in most instances. And I think we met that traveler once in Finland, and he gave me the best explanation ever. And that's what I also feel is he was telling me, I travel a lot, and I realized that taking pictures is forcing me to have that motivation to always find the intriguing element, the unique element in a place. Forests are feel the same everywhere around the world, like in some ways or another. But when I have to take pictures of them, I have to find why this forest is different from the one that was next to it, or, like at the other side of the country. And so I think taking videos and taking pictures with people or of landscapes or of different countries is the same thing. Like when you travel a lot, you're hyper you're like always see new stuff. So a waterfall and then another one and then another one. You can get bored of stuff, like when you're like, oh my God, I've seen 20 waterfalls. Why would I be interested in this one? It looks smaller. But taking pictures, taking videos, you're like, oh, but why is it different? Like you kind of challenge yourself to always find the uniqueness in the place. And I think in our way, we feel that, the social media work, the taking videos, the documenting, all of that is challenging us. Even after 2.5 years, we're still not tired of taking those pictures and taking those videos for that specific element that it challenges us to find what's unique about each place.
Yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also valuable in a sense that you can only take so much in. And so the brain can only handle so much. So if you're taking a picture or you're doing video, when you go back to it later, that is like the ultimate form of remembering. I don't know. Maybe that's like some people would disagree. But it's like it just goes in and then it goes out, and my memory is that. So I love having those photos to look back on, or those videos to look back on and be like, wow, that's really special, and it's another way of being there again in the future, I guess.
Oh, completely. And the reason why we prefer doing videos and photos is because it would be harder for us to scroll through 500,000 photos of 4 years of travel. Because I think after the 50th photo, we'll be like, oh, it's taking so long. That if we were watching one of our episodes, we'd be like, hey, I really want to remember what we did in Norway or whatever. We would go back on YouTube, and there's 3 episodes of, or whatever, I don't know how many, but we could watch one of the episodes of Norway, and it will bring us all the memories back in just 20, 30 minutes. And so we said, yeah, YouTube is good. And for us, the filming is not something we plan, because the trip is the trip, and then the filming is what helps us keep the trip alive. And so we have no idea what's coming up next week. I mean, sure, I know the itinerary and I know where we're going, but we don't know what that national park actually has to offer. We don't know who we're going to meet. We don't know if we're going to break down. We don't know if we're going to fall. We don't know if we're whatever. And so every day it's kind of, what's going to happen. And so we always keep the camera close, because there's always something spectacular. And some videos are good because a lot of fun stuff happen, and some videos are less funny because we've just been driving for 3 days on a highway trying to get to the next place. So it's so varied. But yeah.
Very cool. What are your favorite books?
Recently, I loved a book called Barbaric Days. I'm really bad. I have really bad memory. I would need to find the author. Kendall. It's a book written by a journalist, and he grew up between California and Hawaii, and he has a passion for surfing that no one knows, because he's been traveling, documenting on political events, etc. And he's guiding us through his journey of surfing as a young kid and young adult, and learning how to surf. And chapter after chapter, we go from his journalistic path and writing path and his surfing path when he was younger. And you see his approach to growth through his learning of the ocean and through his learning of traveling, and chapter after chapter. And I just love how smooth it is, and how he talks about development of character through those two passions. And the surfing is kind of this hidden secret as an adult that he has, but it really tells through the book how much it developed him. I don't know, I just love the connection to the ocean, and how the character develops. And it's a biography. I'm going to find the author. It's William Finnegan.
Fantastic. I'm going to add that to my list, immediately. Sounds. And Nick, how about you?
On my end, I'm not a huge book reader, to be honest. I'm more of a podcast guy. So, two of the podcasts I really enjoy is Invisibilia, just because they have tons of really interesting topics about everything. They will just pick an idea, and they'll just make a challenge to make it a podcast, and to do all of the history of it, get the scientifics to talk about it, get all the data, and then spin it off into a full story, and then with a conclusion. And so what I like about Invisibilia is just whatever topic, crazy idea you can get in your mind. So I can just give you an example, which I think was my personal favorite. It was called Poop Friends. And so it's, so there's tons, this is just a silly one, right? But there's so many. And so, it just explains to you the whole history of why poop is a taboo to talk about or not to talk about, and why some have friends and some don't have friends to talk about poop. And so they give you the whole story with scientific data, with history, with they do interviews, and it all becomes a story, and it lasts about 40 minutes to an hour. Some are much longer. But anyway, there's tons of weird and old stories and new stories. So that's one of my podcasts. And then the other one is Against the Odds. They just take books and just repeat them. I'm sorry, stories. Survival stories, and just puts them into podcasts. And we love those. And especially on long driving days, we just listen to those. When Mathilde is reading a book, I'll just listen to those. So I'm more of a listener than a reader, personally.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, we all learn and enjoy that kind of thing, stories and information differently. So I love the podcast and audiobook recommendations as well.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. It's been super fun, and I really look forward to seeing where you go next and what you discover next. And where can people find you online?
So we are Next Meridian Expedition. The name is the same everywhere on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and yeah, the podcasts, anything you Google, it will be always under Next Meridian Expedition. And I think that's about it. That's us. And Ashley, thank you very much for having us. We really enjoyed it. We're also curious on where you'll be going because we do want to cross paths with you. So hopefully, I don't know, are you which direction are you going? Are you going towards Southeast Asia or are you going down to Africa? Or maybe you don't know.
This is a great question. I don't know the answer to.
Okay. Okay.
That's the right answer.
No
Okay, gotcha.
clue whatsoever. We're actually trying to figure out what we're going to do this winter. It's like, do you embrace winter or do you run from winter? And we have Schengen rules to keep in mind as well as Canadians. So for listeners that aren't familiar with Schengen, that just means that we get 90 out of 180 days within the Schengen zone, which covers a lot of European countries. So we have to be out at certain times. So I don't know. We were kind of thinking maybe Turkey, like south and for winter, if we don't want to deal with the cold temperatures. But yeah, it's a really good question. Originally, we were thinking Silk Road. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, it would be great to meet you guys in real life along the way.
Oh yeah, 100%. Perfect. So the mysterious direction we'll have to follow to find out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And if listeners have any question on the journey or like shipping to Australia, things like this, we try to answer everyone who's politely asking questions on social media. So yeah, if you want to ask questions, just say hi and we try to answer as much as possible.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck with your journey. Thank you again for taking the time. And thank you so much to the Overland Journal podcast listeners for tuning into this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.